folks, give a huge round of applause for our next comedian, Robbie Rotgut.
Hey, how you guys doing tonight? I want to thank everybody for coming out. I drove my car to get to the show tonight. yeah, that's right. How many of you guys also took a car to get to the show tonight? Yeah, see a show of hands? That's good. Anyway, like a lot of folks, I was listening to a podcast on the way over. You guys ever hear these podcasts? These things are wild. I've been listening to this one called Boob Tube Boys. Let me tell you, it is a stinker. If I wanted to hear 3 snowflakes talk about Bruce Campbell, I'd turn on the DVD commentary for Burn Notice. Yeah, Burn Notice, standard definition. I've got the whole series. Boob Tube, more like Snooze Tube. Yeah, that's right. I hear all 3 of these guys have cats. Cats! Every time I hear Boob Tube Boys, I can't meow fast enough to turn it off. Because they like cats. Seriously, folks, this podcast, it belongs in the litter box. It makes me want to press pause. Thanks, everybody. You've been great. Drive drunk and drive home.
It is Boob Tube Boys that you're listening to. We're back with more Seinfeld, this time to discuss an episode, and that is Season 5, Episode 4, The Marine Biologist. I'm Brian Vaughn. I am your shaman for this journey, I guess. There's another guy here. His name's Spencer Hendricks. I hope he has something to say for himself.
Not really. I'm just, I'm in full-on boob tube mode, which means I get real serious, and I'm not going to talk unless it's about Seinfeld.
There's this other really, honestly, uncomfortably tall guy here. His name is Van Lee.
I have nothing to say.
Okay,
yeah,
so
I guess we're being real, down to business right
guys,
now.
I thought
Do we need
agreed,
to talk in a podcast? What's the deal with
I
this?
thought
I
we
don't
agreed
think
to
so.
do these when we have things to say.
Horseshit.
If you listen to our last episode, we have really dispensed of all the overarching Seinfeld talk that needs to happen. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't just begin talking about the Marine Biologist. What about you guys?
Let's talk about the Marine Biologist.
Let's do it. You can watch this on Netflix, too, if you feel like it.
Now.
And
It was
you
gone
should.
for months.
This
Couldn't find it
episode
anywhere.
is awesome.
It's kind of weird, by the way. Why
It's
isn't
really
it on
weird.
Peacock? It's
It
owned
should
by
be.
NBC.
I don't know.
I have been meaning to look into that, and this would have been a good time to have done it, but I found that very unusual, considering it never appeared on another network.
Fun, horrible fact, and I don't know all the details about this, but apparently production company-wise or something behind the scenes, Steve Bannon, evil monster villain Steve Bannon,
Gross.
made his money. He's rich because of Seinfeld. Like he authored a deal between whatever studio and something. I don't know all the details, but something like that. And Larry David, Seinfeld, all the people involved are like, I hate that our baby, our show has provided him money to do
Yeah,
what
it
he's
fucking
doing.
sucks that because I laughed at Bookman, Breitbart exists.
That's true, yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah, you're right.
Ugh. Well, I don't want to do this anymore.
Moving on, next week we'll be covering...
Arthur the Aardvark. No, we won't. We'll be covering more Seinfeld again
Buster,
throughout
what
the
are
week.
you up to this week?
So the Marine Biologist is a pretty famous episode for some of the things that occur in it. It begins, as the first several seasons do, with a stand-up routine where Jerry's talking about how we can relate to nature shows.
I've got a note on this, actually, real quickly. I'd like to say...
That's what we do here.
Jerry says that he only roots for, whatever the...
Subject.
Yeah, whatever the creature that's being focused on in that week. Like, he'll be rooting for the prey one week and the predator the next, just because of how it's presented. I disagree. I'm always rooting for the prey, no matter what. It doesn't matter what circumstances are. I want that thing to get away. I want it to get to safety. I don't want to see this big, powerful, top of the food chain motherfucker eat everything. That's just how it goes. I already know that happens. I don't need you to show me. I believe you.
I actually have a loophole in that, because I mostly agree with you. I'm always rooting for the thing that's being attacked. Except for if the predator is some sort of cat, because
Cats are quite predatorial, though. Like they're vicious
they are,
beasts.
but I mean, I can see a lion or a tiger do something and it does a cute thing that my own precious boy Koopa might do. And it makes me think, like, it's okay that this lion just ripped out the jugular of that gazelle.
No, there's no doubt if
He
our
needs
cats,
it. Good boy.
if our cats were big enough, they would murder us all.
Mine is close to big enough, and I'm getting concerned about it.
Vladimir Guerrero, the cat, would just murder whoever my girlfriend's at the time because she takes away attention from Vladimir. I have the instinctual reaction of rooting for the prey, and then brain kicks in and I go, no, actually, predators have a slower development cycle and they don't actually produce as much and blah,
Look
blah,
at
blah.
this nerd we let on our podcast.
Coming from you. That, by the way, brings to my mind when, and I love Conan O'Brien, don't get me wrong, but he'll do bits where, like on the video game, the Clueless Gamer, he's like, you're such a nerd for playing a video game. Fuck you, Conan. You are the nerd. How are you criticizing someone for being nerdy?
Different kind of nerd. He definitely is not a video game nerd. Like that whole segment that he did where he played video games, he was so bad at it.
They're very fun to watch.
They are, yes.
They're very fun to watch. So is Seinfeld, despite all of what I said earlier because of stupid Steve Bannon. Once Jerry's done with his little nature show talk, we're going to Jerry's apartment, and this is where a lot of the episode's plots get set up. Elaine's on the phone with her job, that's Pendant Publishing, finding out she gets to work on a book with famous Russian novelist Yuri Testikov, who's of course not real. Jerry is rudely going on and on about his favorite t-shirt, Golden Boy, while she's trying to do this.
I like that part. I couldn't help but make a note. I've never had a shirt for 6 years because that's how long he's had Golden Boy.
Yeah.
Bad shorts.
I've never done that because if I like a shirt that much, I'm going to wear it so much that it's long,
I have to
tattered, and gone.
retire them periodically. That it's just a fact of life that I've grown into. I don't want because all of my shirts are band shirts, except for this Randy Macho Man Savage shirt that I'm currently wearing. So I got to preserve the decals on the front.
Am I misremembering this? Or is there more about Golden Boy? Because it doesn't happen in this episode. But isn't there one where Golden Boy gets destroyed?
He dies in this one.
He dies at the end of this one.
He doesn't make it.
Post credits.
Oh, maybe that's...
Yeah, it is kind of tricky.
Yeah.
Have to... I was about to leave this one, and then I realized there was that one last scene.
I was about to leave the theater. I, for some reason, thought that's what you were going to say.
Well,
I'd watch Seinfeld in a theater.
I would. But that'd be a great idea. Go to the IMAX.
Let's make that happen. Let's get a hold of our local Alamo Draft House. Let's make it happen. This is also the scene where Jerry tells Elaine that Leo Tolstoy was initially going to title War and Peace, War, What Is It Good For? Before being talked out of it, and then, of course, that later becoming a popular song. Elaine eventually does believe him also. We get George popping into the apartment to do a Jack Nicholson impersonation.
Yeah, that was random.
A Few Good Men, and I don't know why this really, really cracks me up. He just does the "you can't handle the truth" line for no reason.
No reason. And it's not brought back up ever.
No.
Just that one little part.
No. Elaine's reading a little bit of George's mail, because George is getting it there because he doesn't want his mom reading it, which is a nice little touch, and comes across George and Jerry's college alumni magazine. Jerry's in there for his stand-up career. George is absent, and that allows Jerry to do a pretty funny, the reason he's not in there is because he can't handle the truth line, calling back to the Jack Nicholson impersonation.
I think this is, by the way, what I realized, and who knows when we get to the episode I'm covering, is that you can't leave a whole lot out of these episodes because everything is so involved.
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of breeze through some of it for that reason. And again, we get another plot point here that comes into play as Kramer bumps into Elaine physically in the hallway with a big golf club bag and gifts her an electronic organizer that he got from the bank and warns her it has an alarm on it. George is telling Jerry about a nature special and how he is, quote unquote, such a whale fan. And I don't know why, but that reading of that line was really funny to me. Also refers to him as a fish. So we get an inkling that George might be interested in marine life. And then Kramer, of course, barges in because no matter what else is going on, he'd like the guys to know there's a lot of fun to be had.
Hey, who wants to have some fun? I do. Now, you just saying you want to have fun, or do you really want to have fun?
I really want to have fun. I'm just saying I want to have some fun.
So this cracked me up a lot. Kramer's enthusiasm is just outsized beyond belief. No one's really having it. George's line in response is, of course, great at this point. Our next scene takes place on the street at an ATM machine where Jerry is being very annoying, narrating his ATM prompts to the woman beside him on another ATM machine. The whole time I'm thinking, if someone did this beside me, I'd be
so
like, I
annoying.
gotta get out of here.
This man is going to hurt me.
Yeah. Turns out, though, she recognizes Jerry instead of calling the police, and they actually went to college together. And she, too, has received her alumni magazine and wants to know what happened to George. He always seemed kind of like a loser. Jerry doesn't want his friend being talked about like that and quickly pivots to the idea that George has become a marine biologist, probably because he mentioned being a whale fan earlier.
Beautiful. I love that. That's
so-
Seinfeld at its best.
Yeah, because it's a natural link you would come up with.
It's something someone would do.
Yeah.
You're like on the spot. Oh shit.
and
what
none
can
of
I
these
call him?
characters ever tell the truth, so
No.
they're used to doing this.
I actually had misremembered that. I thought George perpetuated this lie like he does all of his other fake things, but this is one that Jerry actually gets him into on his end.
Yeah, for once, George didn't do it himself.
No, yeah, and I because George lies constantly, like worse than anyone, especially about jobs and the architecture thing, which does come up a lot in this one. I was thinking of it as another one of that. I was thinking it was another one where he told a woman that he was a marine biologist.
Well, yeah, I think that's going into this how I remembered it as well.
Yeah.
That he had to make up the lie on the fly, but it's actually Jerry, which kind of makes it better.
I was confused as to why everybody is, so interested in why George isn't in the alumni magazine. Aren't a lot of people not in the alumni magazine?
I would think so, but maybe George was auspicious by his absence, though. Based on what Diane says, no one expected much of George.
Yeah, so why would you even ask about him? Whatever happened to your loser friend that people would
I wanted
forget
to
about?
point and laugh at him with whatever he's up to now. After this happens, Jerry's got to tell George, so they meet at the coffee shop, and Jerry lets George know, Diane's got your number, and she's going to be giving you a call, and Jason Alexander plays this scene great. Just incredulous, like, you better not be fucking with me, I'll end you. Which I thought that was pretty funny. We get across, the point gets made here that Diane was, as George says, the it girl at Queens College. She was the woman all the dudes wanted to be with. So for George to be in this position is pretty unbelievable. And this is before Jerry has told George that he has to pretend to be a marine biologist. And this, to me, is already a testament to how much Jerry Seinfeld grew as an actor from the beginning of the series to now in season 5. He begins to tell George and he says, now I should tell you.
and just the line delivery is great.
His pause is exactly right, especially in front of a studio audience to let everybody catch up slightly.
Yeah.
And I was just very impressed with the
that was
comedic
perfect.
timing. It was a really well read line. This does make George distraught, though, because it's a lie that he doesn't know how to back up in the ways that he previously has.
Yeah, his whole thing is like, look, if I set myself up to lie,
Yeah.
come on, that's great, I can handle it. But this is just awful.
Preposterous. We cut to George at home sitting by the phone on the phone where he's listing things like algae and plankton and then referencing spending time in the Galapagos Islands. It's so great. Just like it's the equivalent of just reading off Wikipedia now.
Yeah, which I can't help but think about how many times I was struck during this. Like, it would have been a lot harder for George to make up stuff about something he knows nothing about in that era.
That's true.
It's not that difficult now. You could pass yourself off as a marine biologist, as long as it wasn't a fellow marine biologist you were talking to. You could probably look up a few things on the fly constantly. And
We
just
have to
make
hope
stuff
for
up.
George's sake that Jerry has Encarta.
I would say that this is what you just said, Spencer, is exactly what I do well, and I don't do a lot well, but I'm real good about bullshitting my way through something because
Life, for instance.
Because what I've
This
learned,
podcast.
if you say it confidently, people will believe you.
Yeah.
And I can, and I don't know, maybe it's because I'm tall and have an authoritative presence sometimes, but it's people will
Doesn't
believe
have
me.
to be. I've actually learned that from the last several years in American history, you can be a dumpy fucking moron.
Fair point,
And everyone
yes.
will listen to you if you're very confident.
Absolutely.
Maybe if you bang on a lot of stuff as well. Speaking of confident people, we are transported to a limo, which contains Elaine, her boss Littman, probably my least favorite of the Elaine bosses.
least
But he's still
interesting.
great. But he's still great.
He has a good scene here where
He
he's
certainly
getting
does.
legitimately angry that Elaine is trying to tell this guy that that's how the war. What is the book that they're actually talking about? Is it just War and Peace? Yeah.
Yeah, and as Spencer said, the Russian author Yuri Testikov's also in the limo, and after Littman recalls a little anecdote about Tolstoy, Elaine then, thinking she's helpful, brings up Jerry's bit of trivia to the author himself, Testikov, saying, no, what is it good for was War and Peace his original name.
Although, one wonders if War and Peace would have been as highly acclaimed as it was had it been published under its original title, War, What Is It Good For?
What?
Yeah, Mr. Lippman. It was his mistress who insisted that he call it War and Peace.
Elaine.
War, What Is It Good For? Absolutely nothing. Oh! Say it again. That's a song. They took it from Tolstoy.
No.
And at the same time, the organizer that Kramer gave Elaine starts beeping. Testikov, like any good angry Russian, gets really, really pissed and chucks it out the window, and it strikes a passerby in the head. Now we cut to Kramer golfing on a beach.
Well, attempting to golf on a beach.
He's struggling, though. He's really struggling. We're back at Jerry's apartment. George is still upset in his own right because he
George
doesn't...
is getting upset.
George is getting upset. He does not know how to defend this lie Jerry has given him, and he says kind of what Van said earlier, like, if this is something I make up, I know it's in my wheelhouse. And he says one of my favorite George lines, which is, you know I always wanted to pretend to be an architect, which is just fantastic. Kramer barges in at this point, and he's not happy either. He chucks his golf clubs to the floor. His performance on the beach, not up to his standards. Sand's getting everywhere. It's in his clothes. Kramer's stumbling around, flicking sand on Jerry's furniture, and does allude to hitting only one ball very well at the beach. This will come back, like everything in this show, into play later on.
What I want to say here is that Jerry is Mr. Neurotic. 100 times worse than I could ever be. I'm quite neurotic. I don't know how he can tolerate any of Kramer. If I'm looking at that
especially
realistically,
with tracking sand in your house, that shit's hard to get out.
I'd have
that
a
would
lock
drive
on
me
that
nuts.
door immediately.
And
Kramer's not allowed in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and he does, I don't know if it's worse, but it's right up there. And I believe the next episode we'll be covering where he just, because he gets tomato juice all over the wall or something and cleans it up, puts it back in the jug. Yeah,
that's in the Kenny
ridiculous.
Rogers episode. Yeah, it's so gross.
Kramer's not a very polite guest.
No, he is not. Jerry gets a phone call while Kramer's trying to desand. And this is a small thing, but George just flings the phone at Jerry, the receiver, and Jerry catches it.
It's like a smooth one-shot take right there.
I really just enjoyed the familiarity of two friends that's built into that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm impressed that they were able to pull it off so smoothly.
Yeah. Turns out on the other line is a woman named Corinne, and she's the woman who was struck by Elaine's organizer when Testikov threw it out the limo window. And she's calling Jerry because Jerry's name was in the organizer. Jerry agrees to meet her at the coffee shop the next day. So Jerry meets Corinne, and Corinne had to go to the hospital and get an MRI because of being struck by this pocket organizer. And Jerry is outraged because he wants to go on a date with Corinne, apparently, and just can't believe that some out-of-touch rich person would do such a thing. Then it dawns on him, Elaine was in a limo and has an organizer, and he kind of knows what the deal is at this point. We're back in the hallway of Jerry and Kramer's apartment building, where Elaine runs into Kramer as he's emerging from his apartment and tells him all about the organizer malfunctioning. And Kramer, of course, is shedding more sand through this whole scene. Jerry shows up too, and Elaine is very pissed. Jerry doesn't know why, but it's, of course, because, he convinced her War, What Is It Good For was the original title of War and Peace. Jerry can't help but be amused anyway. So Elaine, at this point, already befuddled, says, "You'll never believe what happened." Jerry then recounts exactly what happened because Corinne already told him, which prompts one of the very, I think, charming get out shoves from Elaine on Jerry that he knew the whole situation without her telling him. So after the shove, which is a fixture in the series, Elaine gets to the bottom line, which is she needs that organizer back. She's actually already thrown her book out that she was keeping track of work stuff for or with before. And to do that, she's going to need to get a hold of Testikov and get him to pay the hospital bills for Corinne, or else Corinne's not giving that thing back. Meanwhile, on the beach, George is taking a walk with Diane, just kind of talking about whales again. I really love all the interstitial moments of George really pretending like he knows anything.
And it's this scene, I believe, where he tries to start slowly transitioning to architecture. Like, he's like, we don't have to always talk about marine biology. I know other things too, architecture.
And you get a sense George has read like one book about architecture in his life. So he's like, if we could just steer the conversation in that direction.
George often wears just the weirdest little outfits. He'll have poofy coats and so on and so forth.
Little hats.
Every time he wears
Little
a
boy
hat,
hats.
that's what I want to point it out. It never looks like a human wearing a hat.
No.
It's always fascinating to see, and this is certainly one of those scenes.
It definitely is. It looks like the hat is just perched there like a thimble.
Yeah.
It's a very weird look. We now go to the hotel where Yuri Testikov, the Russian author, is staying. And the scheme is as follows. Elaine and Jerry are there. Jerry is going to go up with Elaine, and they're going to have a tape recorder running with the goal, a dictaphone, if you will, with the goal of getting Testikov to admit that he chucked the recorder that hit Corinne in the head. And this will force him into paying the bills.
I'm going to take over here because there's a gag that I heard on another podcast that I despise, the Office Ladies podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I could complain for hours about that show. But apparently Angela Kinsey, who played Angela on The Office, as a Southerner, I think she was born in Missouri, maybe St. Louis or something, says chunked. He chunked it at her. And I'm like, that's not a word. Jenna Fisher said the same thing. Like, no, it's chucked. What are you talking about? Apparently, people are corroborating this. Some places in the South, chunked is able to.
I've never heard
switch
that.
Out. That sounds so stupid to me. I've never.
I feel like
heard
that's
that before.
only if the item being thrown weighs a certain amount.
It has to fit within this little spectrum of it. Sure.
Like if you're throwing a boulder or a cannonball, you're chunking.
You're chunking the hell out of
If
that.
you're throwing
son of
a
bitch.
pencil, you're chucking it.
Right, yeah. And chucking it, now that I think about it, sounds kind of stupid too, but that is the phrase. I've heard that in pop culture.
We're
I've
not
heard
debating
people
how
say
dumb it sounds. Yeah, it sounds dumb no matter what. If you said chorked, that would be dumb too.
Anyway, that's my little A-side.
I liked that. I was very pleased we went in that unexpected direction.
If we were the Office Ladies, we would have already had 6 ad breaks of 3 minutes each by now.
That reminds me, we need to take... No, I'm just kidding. We don't need to take a break. What we need to do is actually talk about the awesome action in this hotel lobby. After Testikov welcomes Jerry and Elaine up, Corinne shows up to the hotel, and she's ready to make this exchange. The organizer for her medical bills. She's smoking a cigarette.
I love that.
In the lobby of the hotel.
And that's totally fine.
That's
90s.
totally fine. What's not is the alarm on the organizer going off again.
90s pop culture.
The doorman comes up to her and asks her to leave. She doesn't want to at first, and he makes her. And this leads to one of my favorite moments in the episode, where as she's leaving, she looks at the doorman's name tag and says, "Whatever you say, Crowell," which is what the guy's name tag says. It's such a nice little detail.
One of those just jokes tossed in for no reason. That is funny.
It made me laugh really hard out loud.
If she just did that, like if the actress herself
I wondered
just did that
too, because it felt so natural.
That whole scene, she kind of took over. She got real.
She was fantastic.
She got really, I don't know, for whatever reason, she was kind of irritated at the setting of the apartment, and just the whole thing was, and she got real smarmy, like with everyone there. It was pretty great.
I'll give you actually another example of a joke that found its way in by mistake, but was so funny they kept it. I watched some behind the scenes thing on YouTube the other day. The episode, The Bottle Deposit, where...
that's a
fantastic
great
episode. I know
One
exactly what you're going to say,
Yeah.
but I'm going to let you tell it. Because
I know what it is too.
so
It's
good.
the ending, right?
Mhm.
It makes me laugh so hard. It's funnier that it went the way it did.
Yes, absolutely. So essentially, Kramer and Newman have this plan that, when you look at the back of a bottle or a can, it says 5 cents if you turn in whatever state, 10 cents if you turn in Michigan. Well, anyway, they decide they're going to transport a whole boatload of cans and bottles to Michigan to get the extra money out of it. There's a whole subplot with Jerry's car being stolen by his mechanic. And essentially, Newman gets kicked out of the mail truck that they're using to transport, and he's walking through the wilderness of, I think it's Ohio, comes across this farmhouse where it's that old trope
the
story.
farmer's daughter parable.
Yep.
The farmer's like, we got a warm bed and some good food for you. You just can't touch my daughter. Well, Newman, of course, does. The farmer finds out, chases him out of the house with a shotgun, running off into the woods. The woman comes out and says, "I love him, Daddy." She turns to look at Newman fleeing and says, "Goodbye, Norman." That was not scripted. She
was
just messed
supposed
up
to
the
call
name.
him Newman.
And the audience just dies.
Mm-hmm.
The studio audience, they just completely lose their shit at that.
So perfect.
It is incredible. And we actually get our brief Wayne Knott. No, he is.
That's the boat version of
Wayne
him.
He is there. Wayne Knight comedy briefly at the end of this episode, too.
Also, real quickly, wasn't the mechanic who steals the car Brad Garrett?
Yes,
I thought
absolutely.
so.
Oh, man.
He does a great job. He gets so upset.
You're not taking care of your sob.
I could tell how jealous he was of Ray Romano even in that episode of Seinfeld.
Hey, guys, Jerry doesn't cry. He sobs.
Oh, with 2 A's. That's a good one. Upstairs at the hotel, Corinne's been forced outside downstairs. Elaine's able to get both the latest manuscript from Testikov, she needed to get that too, and does get her confession on tape very easily from Testikov.
He doesn't deny it.
Problem is, more technology issues as the tape recorder begins whirring loudly in Elaine's purse. Testikov gets pissed. He apparently just hates modern technology, which I would too if it was the 90s kind, and grabs it out of her purse. And, of course, once again, throws it out the open window of the hotel.
I do like how his thing is angrily throwing
Every
electronic
time.
devices out windows.
And, of course, because she's been forced outside, it once again strikes poor Corinne down below, ending her storyline and perhaps life. We don't.
That's dark.
We don't know how high up they were.
They did that, though, later in the series. I just watched the episode where the Desperado episode.
Yeah. Oh, man.
And at the end of it, Elaine tries to make her boyfriend who loves Desperado's song Witchy Woman, which he has nothing to do with. He gets into an accident, and at the end of the episode, as the credits roll, the doctor's getting ready to operate him. Witchy Woman comes on, and he has the same reaction. He stops, and he can't react. And the implication then is that they're losing him, and the guy dies because the doctor's too into Witchy Woman.
Oh, which is great. The musical taste in Seinfeld might be the worst part of Seinfeld. They have like the most yuppie taste in songs.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all like 1978 to 1990 yacht music or something. Or elevator music. It's very, very weird. But to each his own. I don't know. I'll have to talk to Jerry about it later when we interview him.
Of course.
When you're in his car getting coffee.
You and I'm getting I mean, I've made jokes on here. That's close enough to being a comedian, I guess. Who knows? People have heard this before.
At least 10 to
couple,
12.
yeah.
Some that we're related to have heard this before. So poor Corinne, she's struck in the head again. Meanwhile, Kramer is dumping sand out of his shoe from his window when he accidentally drops his shoe on Wayne Knight Newman, who in such a simple little part made me laugh because it's just a shoe dropping from very high up. And Newman is frozen in his tracks and then starts screaming.
Yeah, more of the physical comedy element there.
Which, as you said, Spencer, he does so well.
Yeah, he and Michael Richards really do a good job at that.
They're very much natural. So that parallels the scene with Corinne. Meanwhile, on the beach, a crowd is gathering because a whale is sick and the whale needs help. And someone yells out, "Is anyone here a marine biologist?"
I'm actually pretty sure that was Larry David,
Larry
too.
David.
Yes.
He gets those lines all the time. He's
And he
not
reads them with such
in
a
very
plum.
many of the episodes, except for Steinbrenner. But he, in the Cosmo Kramer one, where they figure out his name, Kramer's starting to like being called that.
Yeah.
He's out in the street and everyone's like, Cosmo, Cosmo. And he's like, hey. And one of them is Larry David. And he's like, what do you know, Cosmo? And so, they always have Larry David read those lines like an off-screen person.
Just like shouting off screen.
Right.
Yeah.
That is just a hilarious thing to ask a crowd of people.
Yeah.
Is anyone here a marine biologist?
And how it ties in so absurdly specifically to this episode. Man. So George is reluctant because he doesn't fucking know anything about marine biology, maybe just plankton. But a lot of the crowd cheering and a little do it for me from Diane do the trick. And George rolls up his pant legs and confidently heads out into the ocean. And the next we see him is, of course, in the coffee shop as the gang knows something monumentous has happened. And this is a pretty famous Seinfeld monologue from George, and you can see why. And I mean, I'm not going to tell it to you. Let's let Jason Alexander do it.
So I started to walk into the water. I won't lie to you, boys. I was terrified. But I pressed on. And as I made my way past the breakers, a strange calm came over me. I don't know if it was divine intervention or the kinship of all living things, but I tell you, Jerry, at that moment, I was a marine biologist. The sea was angry that day, my friends. Like an old man trying to send back soup in a deli. I got about 50 feet out, and suddenly, the great beast appeared before me. I tell you, he was 10 stories high if he was a foot. As if sensing my presence, he let out a great bellow. I said, "Easy, big fella." And then, as I watched him struggling, I realized that something was obstructing its breathing. From where I was standing, I could see directly into the eye of the great fish.
Mammal.
Whatever.
Hey, what did you do next?
Well, then, from out of nowhere, a huge tidal wave lifted me, tossed me like a cork, and I found myself right on top of him, face to face with the blowhole. I could barely see from the waves crashing down upon me, but I knew something was there. So I reached my hand in, felt around, and pulled out the obstruction.
George is, of course, famously raising up the golf ball that Kramer did hit well into the ocean, thus turning that whole story inside out. It's so great.
Hole in one. Is what
Hole
Kramer
in
says.
one.
Now, fun fact about this. Apparently, the monologue wasn't in the script. And the night before they were to record that, Seinfeld and Larry David had a stroke of genius and wrote that. Then when they got the script, Jason Alexander had no time to prepare to read it in advance or whatever. That is his first and only take. He nailed it. And they're like, that's so good, we don't even need to do another one.
I think I did know that at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you definitely don't do it any more perfect than he read that. I almost goosebumps thinking about it.
Yeah, that's the poise of a theater actor right there. He knew what the fuck he was doing.
Yeah, and then the very theatrical reveal of the golf ball.
Yes.
And I've always loved the studio audience member who cannot help herself. That it's like a guffaw cackle sort of thing when she sees the golf ball. That's how well Jason Alexander does that whole thing. And here, Kramer actually does a really good job in well, it's kind of physical, but his face and the way his voice breaks when he asks, "Is that a title?"
Yes.
It's like, it's perfect. Like that.
He's trying to keep
scene.
it still really casual,
Yeah.
full well knowing it was his fault.
It's just such a perfectly acted scene.
We get our first little credit card here and then our little post-credit sequence. We're still in the coffee shop, and George compares the whole event to being like Rocky. Diane kissed him, and George was taken in by the emotion, so much so that he actually told her the truth about a thing.
Which he never does.
He never does. That he was not a marine biologist, which, first time he tells the truth, and she's like, nope, and doesn't want anything to do with him at that point. And in terms of other bad news, Jerry finds out Golden Boy has died, and he's got to make the pivot to a new t-shirt, Baby Blue, a signifier of better times to come.
I like that he refers to it as his son.
Yeah.
It's my son, Baby Blue.
And in the very end here, we find out George is now fighting being covered in sand. Kramer's problem throughout the episode. And that's it for the Marine Biologist, which was incredible. I loved watching it. Watched it 3 times in preparation in total and didn't mind.
Probably my favorite episode when I was younger. I don't know if I can say that now. It's certainly a top 3, but just a flawless episode of Seinfeld.
Yeah, it just, everything is so interlocked, and not that Seinfeld often does, but there's nothing in it that feels...
There's no fluff.
Yeah, it's all killer, no filler. That's what I'd like to say. Do you guys have any final thoughts on this episode?
I don't think so. Yeah, that ending scene puts it catapults it right to the very top of the best Seinfeld episodes. Just that last part by itself does it.
It's incredible. Well,
Whale of an episode.
it is a whale of an episode.
Well, let's move on to the next one.
And we will, because...
What kind of porpoise did that have?
Next time, a dolphin, we have... Well, that one didn't work, did it?
Sea turtle.
Yeah, there we go. Next time, we are actually covering a Season 8 episode, our first of 2 from that season. And it will be Season 8. Which one of you is going next?
Yeah, so we'll do Season 8, Episode 8, The Chicken Roaster.
Little out of order, but deal with it.
Yeah, it's not that much out of order. It's like 5 episodes
Fuck
or
you,
something.
listener.
Turn it off right now. Let's stop
also,
listening to the podcast.
But after you fuck off, give us some money. Go to patreon.com/Boo2Inc.
See, it's not as easy as it sounds. I fucked that up so much.
It was bound to happen for me as well. For as little as $2 a month, you get a bonus episode every week from us, and they're very freeform and wild. Unlike all of the poise and confidence we show in our mainline episodes like this one.
Mm-hmm.
We're also on Twitter and Instagram at BoobTubeBoys. We're individually on Twitter. I'm at Loud Guitar Brian, Van.
At Manly.
Spencer.
Number 3, French_hen.
We are not yet on YouTube. We're not on...
Yeah, we are.
We're not on Friendster or
We're on everything.
or MySpace.
Friendster, wow.
We're not on Kazaa or LimeWire.
We are on LinkedIn.
We're not in any news
We are
groups.
hiring too. We're hiring on LinkedIn. Just submit your application.
It's
and,
funny. I did say to Brian's sister last night after I had her do some trivia stuff, which you heard in the introduction episode before this one, and I was like, I need a Boob Two Boys assistant. I don't have any money to pay anyone.
No, well, I mean,
pay 'em
they
in-
don't need that.
I don't know, like free podcast karma.
Yeah, they can listen to these episodes for free, like everyone.
Like everyone else does.
We'll give them the Patreon subscription for free.
They'll have the Boob Two Boys stamp of approval.
So that's it for us. Next time around, we will collectively bite into a gigantic chicken leg.